It is another world, thriving with 100 million people, connected by elaborate roads, bridges, and social networks spanning continents, with some of the world's largest cities aligned to the heavens. It is the birthplace of some of the greatest civilizations on Earth. This is the Americas, more than 500 years ago. Native Americans create America's first democracy that later inspires the United States Constitution. Shape Mississippi swampland into the largest pyramids on the planet. Carve Andean mountain slopes into fields that feed millions. They domesticate plants that provide 60% of the food consumed in the world today. Native Americans invent a way of life intimately connected to earth, sky, water, and all living things.
Okay, second part of my video. This might be longer than expected. My friend brings up an interesting point on transracial people. There is a man identifying as a Filipino, and here goes on why it's not the same compared to Felix the Guarani, aka Felix Jimenez, or like Taki Amaru, in my opinion.
Well, it's increasingly accepted, the wisdom of this age, is that everybody is allowed to define his or her own identity. Your gender is not determined by your chromosomes. Race is a social construct, not a matter of genetics. Jadu is simply taking that wisdom to its logical conclusion. Born a white male named Adam Wheeler, Jadu now identifies as a Filipina woman and joins us tonight. Jadu, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tuck.
So, I'm not here to mock you, but...
Okay, Felix was born and raised knowing Guarani. Taki Amaru may not be born and raised, but she lives in a Quechua community. And me, I have family that have a lot of influence from the Andes, and I have family that are part Andean. This guy was never brought up with anything Filipino. No connections with them. Just woke up one morning and said, I'm Filipino. Let's break it down. There are more than one type of Filipino and have distinct identities based on regions such as Ilocano, which is a language around the Manila area of southern Luzon. Basically, is he Ilocano or is he Cebuano, another group of Filipino? Has he lived among them? Did he marry into a Filipino family? Is it in his blood? Is it in his family, like in-laws or step-family at least? Here is one born and raised in the Philippines. Plus, it's noteworthy mentioning how this Filipino comes from an ethnic group slowly replacing their language for Tagalog, even though they are not of Tagalog ancestry by blood. Which is another thing to add. Is your government assimilating you?
Kapampangan, one of my own mother tongues, today, despite being one of the top 8 languages in the Philippines, in Angeles City and in the province of Pampanga, the heartland of the Kapampangan society, the motherland of the Kapampangan people, many parents do not speak Kapampangan to their Kapampangan children. It's a sad reality that many Kapampangans today prefer to talk to their children in English or Tagalog, rather than teach them our own indigenous mother tongue. And if we don't do anything about it now, Kapampangan might just disappear forever. And when we stop speaking our mother tongues, when we stop passing it down to the next generation, we are literally losing grip of our own culture and identities, of our own unique heritage.
A lot of Filipino people who live in California, the particular part of California that I live in, which is Orange County, there really aren't that many Filipino people. I also want to just say too, Filipino people are known for having huge families, and I do come from a big family, but even still to this day, a great majority of my cousins still live in the Philippines, or they're just living in different parts of the world. So I really grew up basically surrounded by a lot of adults, and in terms of the people my age, they were all predominantly Caucasian. I went to the same school from kindergarten to 8th grade, and that was predominantly Caucasian. And additionally, I was a dancer growing up, and the first dance studio that I danced at from the age of 4 to 11 years old, it was again predominantly Caucasian. But when I turned 12, that's when I moved from that predominantly Caucasian dance studio to a dance studio in Diamond Bar. And because it was in Diamond Bar, there were tons of Asian people and tons of Filipino people. It was during that year when I was surrounded by a lot of Filipino people that were my age for the first time in my life that I strangely felt very self-conscious about the fact that I was Filipino, which is kind of ironic because I felt like I wasn't Filipino enough in comparison to the people there. To be a little bit more specific, these people were my friends. You know, we're young and obviously we've grown and we've matured, so we hopefully know better. But when we were younger, so many of my Filipino friends during that point in my life would kind of like make fun of me if I didn't know how to say certain Filipino words. They would make me feel bad if I've never tried certain Filipino foods. They'd make me feel awful if I couldn't understand certain Filipino phrases or words in Tagalog. I don't speak Tagalog, but I do understand it. I've always been given shit because of that. Because of all of this, like, oh, you don't know this? How can you be Filipino? I can't believe you've never tried this. How are you Filipino? Being bombarded with those kinds of remarks growing up made me feel very, very self-conscious about me not feeling Filipino enough.
Now I'd like to mention about how we ended up having a lot of words from the empire's language depending on location. If Aztec, then it was Nahuatl in Mexico and Central America. If Inca, then it was Quechua. The predominant native language used largely for trade and other things was the language the Spanish enforced during doctrination. But by the time of the independence in early 1800s, that all changed, and the government throughout Latin America, except Paraguay, began to spread the notion about indigenous way of life to be a thing that will deprive us of progress and better living, that by the time of the early 1900s, the native languages would plummet drastically into a minority group due to shame and poor notion towards our indigenous side. To have an idea what language was like before Spanish contact, you can through the story of Malinche. And thanks to indoctrination, the Nahuatl language speaking population grew a lot before independence.
You say, no te agüites, tocayo, quieres un chocolate, quieres un popote, mira el papalote, no pides el zacate, quieres, all these words are Nahuatl.
At the press conference, Maria Choque from the UN Forum on Indigenous Issues described the show as backward and the vestige of colonialism.
One cannot believe that colonialist viewpoints still exist. This is a racial, discriminatory, and colonialist focus. It's a focus on racial discrimination. I believe we have overcome these debates in the United Nations system with the arrival of the first indigenous groups to those discussions.
Speakers at the conference criticized the TV channel which airs the show, accusing it of using racist topics to increase viewership. The UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean supported the event against the program.
Governments have to make sure that the means of communication properly reflects indigenous cultural diversity. Of course, this means not having racist representations and eliminating all forms of discrimination and racism.
Other speakers called for spaces in media where they can put forward their struggles as indigenous women and also how their ancestral knowledge has been a positive contribution to the general society. The show is also one of the targets of recent popular marches protesting Peruvian TV as strike.